one and all who have joined today for our second joint WHIZ Talk session with PMI Lakeshore Ontario Chapter. It's really great that we could continue this journey, which we started last month with the first session, joint session with Lakeshore Chapter. This is a very special session, the WHIZ Talks, for we are giving opportunity for our chapter members, both chapters, a platform to share their knowledge with the fellow chapter members, as well as become a speaker for the chapter as well. There are many topics that we have got which were so unique, and everyone were so happy to get those knowledge sharing from their co-members. So today we have one such unique session on we are leaders when it comes to psychological safety. What is it that we are for? We might think that changing the culture and behaviors is a responsibility of the senior executives within our companies. But as project managers, we are just as responsible for psychological safety if we want high-performing teams. So today's presentation will cover the importance of psychological safety, diffuse some common myths about it, and provide some practical tips on how we build safe teams. And we have a speaker of the day from PMI Lakeshore Chapter, Mr. Kiron D. Bondale. He is a senior consultant for World Class Productivity Inc., delivering training and consulting services. Kiron has set up and led project management offices and has over 2.5 decades of experience. He has been an active member of PMI since 1999 and served as volunteer director on the board of PMI Lakeshore Chapter for 6 years. He has contributed a lot to PMI, even the new PMI Standards Plus platform, and has even reviewed multiple PMI standards and practice guides, including the 6th and the 7th editions of PMIK. So I am really privileged to introduce our speaker of the day. And do you know, he is also the author of Easy in Theory, Difficult in Practice, 100 Lessons in Project Leadership. So please, let's welcome our speaker of the day, Kiron, and listen to him. Thank you.
Perfect. Kiron. Thank you so much, Akila, and thank you, Hari, for the invitation. So let's jump right into it. Hopefully all of you can see what I'm holding up over here. It is a model, a scale model of a 747 jet. And as many of you are probably aware, the Boeing 747 was the queen of the skies. It was the main carrier used by most large international airlines for taking passengers, large groups of passengers, 350, 400 people, to different countries around the world. Very reliable, very safe aircraft. But my story is going to start back in March 1977. And this is a story that, as a child, I had heard when it happened, and I had read up on it shortly thereafter. But it's only in the last few years that I really came to appreciate what caused this tragedy. March 27, 1977, in the Canary Islands, which are part of Spain, is the worst civilian air disaster. Over 550 people were killed when a KLM 747 jumbo jet collided with a Pan Am 747 when both of them were attempting to take off from the small Los Rodeos Airport, which is in Tenerife in the Canary Islands. So what happened? Was this a mechanical disaster? Was it poor weather? Or was it pilot error? So let's understand what happened that led up to this event. A number of international flights had been diverted from the Las Palmas airport in Spain, which is a much bigger airport, because of a bomb which had exploded in a flower shop at that airport. All these flights had been diverted to the Los Rodeos airport, a small airport, very few traffic controllers and ground crew. So that airport is packed with all of these diverted planes, and there's a thick blanket of fog that has descended on the runways by the time that the planes are refueled and ready for takeoff in the mid-afternoon around 4 p.m. Now the KLM flight has Captain Jacob Van Zanten as their pilot. And Jacob Van Zanten is a legend in the KLM Air Force. He is one of their most senior officers. He is also the instructor for many of their pilots and co-pilots. So he's absolutely the face of KLM. In fact, in the early 70s, KLM used to have magazine ads and TV ads where he was prominently portrayed. But Jacob Van Zanten is frustrated. He's been sitting in this aircraft for many hours. He wanted to get home to his family. And so he feels that it is now time for their plane to take off. He feels he has got permission from the air traffic control tower. So he starts to roll down the runway. Now his first officer, Klaas Meurs, who happens to be also a fairly experienced officer, is not sure. That fog is on the runway, and he's not sure whether there may be another aircraft somewhere in their path. So he says, yeah, I think we're ready for takeoff, but he voices a bit of uncertainty. Captain Van Zanten says, let's go. They start to barrel down the runway, and as they're just leaving the tarmac, they manage to collide with that Pan Am aircraft, resulting in that horrible air disaster. Why was Klaas Meurs unable to share his concerns more vocally with Captain Van Zanten? Why was Captain Van Zanten unable to or unwilling to pick up on the fear or the uncertainty in the voice of his first officer? Let's look at another scenario. I think all of us are very familiar with this one. After many successful launches of the space shuttle, in 1986, Space Shuttle Challenger exploded a few seconds after takeoff. President Ronald Reagan appointed the Rogers Commission to investigate what could have caused this. NASA was known as an agency that had a real commitment to quality, that had a wonderful track record, that was known for bringing people back safely. So what happened? The Rogers Commission found that NASA's organization culture and their decision-making processes had been key contributing factors to the accident. The agency was violating its own safety rules. Now, NASA engineers, as well as the third-party contractor that was responsible for building the solid rocket boosters, they were both aware that there were design flaws in the O-rings that joined the pieces of the solid rocket booster. They knew that they could fail under repeated cold and warm conditions. They had raised these concerns, but they had been told that budgets were tight and deadlines could not be missed. And as a result, the shuttle exploded and a flight crew was lost. Both of these case studies relate to psychological safety. So we need to understand, what is psychological safety? The term has been used for many decades, but one of the first instances of its use is back in 1965. Ed Sheen and Warren Bennis defined psychological safety as, when we don't have it, it reduces our anxiety, or when we have it rather, it reduces our anxiety about being basically accepted and being felt as worthwhile. So when we're in a work environment, if we might be feeling challenged or feeling a lack of confidence or feeling that what we do might be held against us, if we're in a safe environment, it reduces that anxiety. William Kahn built on the definition from Sheen and Bennis. In 1990, in this article that he wrote, he suggested that psychological safety will affect an individual's willingness to be able to employ or express themselves physically, so maybe in a physical project or job site, cognitively, in terms of how we think, and emotionally during our role performances. If we don't have safety, we're going to disengage or withdraw and defend our personal selves. In other words, we're going to value our own safety over the safety of our team, our organization, or society. And finally, Amy Edmondson, who is a researcher with Harvard, she's spent a lot of her career understanding how psychological safety affects performance. She looked at extending the definition to what happens within a team. And her perspective is it is a shared belief held by members of a team that the team is safe for interpersonal risk taking, which means that within our team, we feel safe taking risks. Google, about a dozen years ago, did a project named Aristotle. And the reason they called it Aristotle is it comes from the quotation from Aristotle, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. They wanted to understand within their organization what made certain teams higher performing than others. And so they gathered data from 180 teams. What they discovered was there are 5 factors that lead to high performance, but they determined that psychological safety was the underpinning of the remaining factors. In other words, you could have structure and clarity around roles and responsibilities. You might be working on a project that has a higher purpose, that gives you a sense of meaning. But if you don't feel safe, those other 4 factors would not contribute to being able to perform at your best and for the team to be high performing. Dr. Timothy Clark came up with a model for psychological safety because he believed you can't just jump from no safety to feeling safe. There's a progression. And in a way, it's almost like Maslow's hierarchy, which all of us as project managers know about. You can't jump to a higher level if you haven't achieved the lower level. So let's understand what are the levels of Dr. Clark's model. The very first level is what we call inclusion safety. Inclusion safety is that we're giving respect to other people within our team, recognizing them as fellow human beings. We are giving them the humanity and the permission to interact with us as equals, as fellow human beings. That is basic level of psychological safety. The next level up is what's known as learner safety. In learner safety, we want to make sure that we're respecting the needs of the other team members to grow and learn. Once we achieve that, we get to contributor safety. Contributor safety is saying we will respect and support the individual in contributing value within our team, being able to do their job, being able to help our team deliver value. And then the final level, and this is the one that's required for teams that are going to be creative, innovative, is what's known as challenger safety. With challenger safety, we're giving respect for the individual's ability to innovate, and we're giving them permission to challenge the status quo in good faith. Now you'll notice that we have these 2 dimensions. Respect is in the vertical dimension, permission to act is in the horizontal dimension. If we are too much on one dimension or the other, we fall into what Dr. Clark called the gutters. And the gutters are an imbalance. One side of the gutter is what's known as paternalism. In other words, we might want to keep the person safe, but we treat them like a child. We're not giving them the permission to stretch themselves, to grow, to develop, to challenge the status quo. On the other hand, we have exploitation, where we're using the person, getting what we can out of them, but we're not respecting them as a fellow human being. So it's a narrow path that we have to tread to be able to develop that role of psychological safety and to be able to get to challenger safety. Now, how does psychological safety help our project teams? What are the benefits we get out of it? When our team members feel safe, they're going to be open to sharing their assumptions. They don't have to be prodded or they don't have to be questioned. What assumptions are you making? They will openly share those. And that's really important because all of us know that as project managers, an assumption could be the cause of a risk, or it could be the source of a risk if that assumption is invalid. And so if our team members are willing to share their assumptions, that is giving us early insights into risk identification. Team members are willing to ask for help when they need it. And on top of that, they're willing to extend a hand to others when others need the help. Because asking for help requires us to show vulnerability. And helping someone else requires us to maybe participate in an activity in which we're not experts. Both of those cases require us to feel comfortable that we might not be our best. Team members are comfortable saying when they don't know something. And that's important because we won't improve as project teams if people are acting as heroes, if they're portraying that they can do anything. We want our team members to say when something is too challenging for them, so then we can provide the support they require. They're eager to experiment, and this is critical for creativity and innovation. When we experiment, we have to accept that an experiment may fail, or it may reveal data that is counter to the hypothesis that we've designed. And that's okay, but we need to make a safe environment for experimentation. And team members will proactively provide constructive feedback to one another. Teams will only improve when team members understand what they need to change or understand what behaviors they need to modify. If someone is very self-aware, they can figure it out for themselves and they will improve. But in many cases, people are not fully self-aware. And so there's the need for us to provide feedback. Well, we can only provide feedback if we feel safe to do so, and the person receiving the feedback will only accept the feedback if they believe the other person is operating from a level of respect and real empathy and willingness to support us. And this ties back to our first two case studies, team members will have the courage to speak up when they feel something is wrong. They won't stay silent. They will push the point to make sure their concerns are heard. Now, psychological safety, like almost any other concept in leadership, has some myths associated with it. So it's important that we diffuse those myths. It's not about being nice to everyone. If we are valuing niceness over performance, over treating each other with respect, then we're likely to ignore behaviors that should be corrected. So psychological safety does not mean that we're just trying to keep everyone happy all the time. There's also this perception that it might cause the team to overlook defects. Maybe we tolerate them because we don't want to have people feel bad that they introduced a defect. Again, that is not the case. If someone has done something wrong, if a defect has been introduced into our product or service, we need to provide that feedback. That is how we improve. And it definitely doesn't mean we can say whatever we want. Psychological safety is not a permission to be a bully or to be a bull in a china shop. We still have to respect one another. We have to treat each other as how they want to be treated. And psychological safety is not just the responsibility of our senior leaders. Yes, we would really like to have our senior leaders champion the cause of psychological safety, build it into the values of our organization, have a zero tolerance policy for bad behavior. But that's something that we can't wait for. We need to start introducing it ourselves in our teams and set the example that then our leaders can follow. Now, sometimes I get asked the question, might there be a link between psychological safety and emotional intelligence? As you know, emotional intelligence covers topics such as self-awareness, our ability to self-manage or control how we act on our emotions, being socially aware, and being empathetic to recognize others' emotions. Emotional intelligence helps to build better interpersonal relationships. So could it have a connection with psychological safety? If we have a team where the individual team members are operating at a higher level of emotional intelligence, it should help with creating psychological safety because they're more likely to pick up on the emotions of one another. They're more likely to be able to understand when they are not in a good place and to seek assistance. When we have low emotional intelligence in the members of our team, it's very difficult for the team to encourage others to actively participate. There might be more friction as we're working together, more unhealthy conflict. And teams with lower emotional intelligence are less capable of being able to perceive when they've said something or done something that is hurting or bothering someone else. That results in lower safety. But psychological safety can also help with boosting emotional intelligence because when we're operating at a higher level of psychological safety, our team members are more willing to provide feedback to one another, which is going to help everyone become more self-aware, self-managing, and socially aware. So there is a virtuous loop between psychological safety and emotional intelligence. But what's in it for you for a leader? I've talked about the benefits to team members. I've talked about the benefits at an organizational or a project level, but how does this help you as a leader? My belief is that as time passes, we're going to see a greater and greater demand for leaders that are capable of building psychologically safe teams. If you have a track record of this, you are going to be that much more marketable. And why is that? Well, it's easier to retain team members. Team members will want to work for someone that keeps them safe. They don't want to work for a leader that allows toxic behavior. You're going to get higher productivity from your team members. Instead of them spending their time worrying about what they're saying or how they're saying it or what they're doing or could they lose their jobs, they can focus on the project work. And you could be the project manager who team members want to work with. As we saw, it's a critical prerequisite for innovation. So when you're on a project, you're leading a project that is requiring a high degree of innovation and creativity, you need to be able to build psychological safety. And your role as a leader will be to focus on increasing the degree.
I think there is an echo. Please go on. Yeah.
Perfect. Your role as a leader is to make sure that we're increasing the intellectual friction between our team members. What I mean by that is when there is a design approach, there is a question, there's an issue, there may be many different approaches that people are considering. We want to create a safe environment for people to have a healthy, robust discussion, to actively collaborate, to problem solve. That's intellectual friction. But we want to be reducing social friction. We want to make sure that people aren't having bruised egos, that they're not feeling hurt by what is being discussed. So what can you do as a project manager? How do you go about building psychological safety within your teams? There's a 3-step recipe that I would like to share with you. As with everything else on our projects, we start with planning. From there, we need to live it. And finally, we need to champion it. So let's start with planning. One of the first things you can do to build psychological safety is to start with your team working agreements. Maybe you call those the ground rules. So at the start of your project, help your team to develop their own working agreements and challenge them on how to incorporate psychological safety into those working agreements. You can also share information about your personal work style, your own pet peeves, things that work for you, things that don't work for you. Encourage your team members to do the same with one another. Get to know one another, understand what each person's kind of strengths and weaknesses might be. Make sure that you share the purpose and the goals of the project so they know when something might support the goals or when something may not support it, and they can challenge it. You can use games like delegation poker to be able to help your team members understand what types of decisions do they have control over, or do they have influence to be able to speak up about. And start by giving your team members a license to disagree. If they see something, let them say something. If we're operating in a virtual environment or a hybrid environment where some of your team members are remote, some of them are local, plan for effective use of your virtual tools. For example, you can use hand raises or anonymous polling features of your video conferencing tools. That will give permission then, or make it safer for the quieter people within your team to signal that they would like to say something, because they might lack the confidence to speak up when someone else is speaking. You could use online chats when there's a topic where you're concerned that the louder or the more vocal team members might drown out the voices of the quieter ones. If there's a particularly challenging topic, you could break your big team into smaller teams and use breakout rooms. That creates a smaller, safer working space. You could use anonymized online brainstorming to get feedback regularly. And when it comes to our video cameras for our video conferences, encourage people to hide the self view, because when we hide the view of ourselves, it helps to reduce our self-consciousness. We want to formally assign dissent. What do we mean by that? We want to make it safe for people to disagree. One way to do that is to conduct a pre-mortem. So before your project starts, or before the work is really getting underway, have everyone get together and have them imagine the project has failed. What might have caused it to fail? What are all the possible ways in which it might fail? That way we're consciously thinking about the negatives. When you're having a major decision discussion, appoint or volunteer one of your team members to be a devil's advocate. Their role is to challenge what everyone else is saying. That makes it safe for them to do so. And provide your team members with an appropriate version of Toyota's and-on cord. Encourage your team members to use it. Now, if you're not familiar with what Toyota's and-on cord is, in Toyota factories, on the assembly line, there's this cord that any team member is able to pull. And by doing that, they can stop the assembly line. So when they see that something is wrong, when there's a quality issue or safety issue, rather than waiting to get permission from senior management, every team member is empowered to stop the work being done. So think about ways to introduce that with your own team that are appropriate in your context. It's important to get buy-in from your stakeholders, though. So meet with the key senior stakeholders to get their commitment to psychological safety. At a bare minimum, this should include your sponsor, your customer, and key functional managers. And if they don't know what psychological safety is, This is an opportunity to educate and coach them on it. So how is planning put into real life? Well, cockpit relationship management is a program that was developed by the airline industry after a number of disasters like the Canary Islands one, but also in 1982, there was an Air Florida disaster when in the US, the freezing rain put ice on the wings of the plane crashed because the co-pilot was uncomfortable telling the captain to turn back in that freezing rain. So the airline industry developed this program called CRM. And part of that training program gives crew members the permission, the authority, the need to speak up to their captains when they feel something is wrong. And it demands that captains listen to crew concerns and crew safety. After CRM was introduced, the number of air accidents that resulted from an error that could have been avoided dramatically came down. Now we move to live it. How do we go about living psychological safety? The first one is we need to follow up with our team members one-on-one. When we've had a meeting and you notice one of your team members was particularly quiet, meet them after the meeting. Take them aside for a coffee, sit them down and say, hey, I saw you were pretty quiet during the meeting today. Was there something that you were uncomfortable sharing with the group? Please let me know. Make sure you do that follow-up. It's also important that we as leaders model the behavior that we expect our team members to show. And part of that is to be vulnerable. You want to be vulnerable and authentic with your team. Harvard Business Review recently published an article where the authors did some research and they found out that leaders who shared failures that they had experienced are able to inspire their teams better than leaders that pretend to be superheroes. So we need to embrace the truth. We need to be comfortable ourselves saying, I don't know. We need to be able to ask for help openly and without embarrassment. We also need to admit quickly and openly when we've made a mistake and apologize for it. And we need to show that we are willing to get outside our comfort zone. If we're always playing it safe, if we're not experimenting or taking on challenges, then that's sending the message to our team that they should do the same. We also want to make sure that we make Hanlon's razor our mantra. It's very easy for us to assume that someone's behavior is because of bad intent or laziness or some other sin. But most of the time it's not. Hanlon's razor says, never attribute to malice that which can be adequately explained by stupidity. Give people the benefit of the doubt. Strive for building long-lived stable teams. This is important beyond psychological safety, but especially for psychological safety. If you have built a team where people are feeling safe, try to keep that team together as long as possible. And maybe that means encouraging your organization or influencing your leaders to move from being project-centric to value stream-centric or product-centric, where the teams are able to stay together for a longer period of time. When team members have been together for a long period of time, the safety maintains. But when we allow that team to dissolve and we create a new team, we're starting over from scratch. When there's an important topic that you want the team to discuss, don't speak first. Speaking first when you have authority is effectively quieting your team members. So you have to listen first. If you don't, your team members will eventually have nothing to say. And it's very important that you don't shoot the messenger. So when somebody brings you bad news, you need to be self-aware, not just of what you're saying, but also your body language. You need to start to develop a high tolerance for bad news. And after someone has shared bad news with you, maybe a day later, someone's brought a project issue to you, the project's in trouble, maybe the next day, have a quick one-on-one conversation with them. Ask them, did they feel safe when they shared that information with you? Did they feel safe based on your reaction? That's how you'll become more self-aware. And it's important that we don't ridicule one another. We want to eliminate ridiculing behavior in ourselves. And so how do we do that? Well, solicit feedback from our team members to see, are we demonstrating any microaggressions? Are we putting team members in a situation where they feel unsafe or they feel that they're being made fun of? So when you want to, let's say, reject the feedback from a team member, or you're thinking that their idea is a bad idea, don't scold them. Thank them for contributing. Explain why that idea will not be suitable. So an example of living psychological safety from a leadership perspective is the Fukushima Daini reactor in Japan. March 11th, 2011, a 9.0 magnitude earthquake hit the northeast coast of Japan. Tsunami waves up to 45 feet high hit the coastline. Now, I'm sure all of you are familiar with the Fukushima Daiichi disaster. That nuclear reactor was not able to be safely shut down. There was loss of life and there was radiation leakage. But you may not know about Fukushima Daini. That reactor was just 5 miles down the coast from Fukushima Daiichi. All 4 of its reactors were safely shut down and there was no loss of life. So what happened? Why the difference between these two situations? Well, Naohiro Masuda, who was the plant superintendent at Fukushima Daini, he was very open with his team. He admitted mistakes. He created a safe environment to try things out. He was open for criticism. He was calm when bad news was presented to him. Now, this situation was extremely unsafe, but the team felt safe to try different things out to safely shut down the reactor. They didn't have a standard operating procedure that was able to work in the situation they were in, so they had to experiment. But Masuda's behavior and his leadership style made it safe for the team to try things out. When those things failed, it made it safe for them to regroup and try something else. The final step is to champion it. And it starts by discussing it. Make psychological safety a regular topic of discussion at your team events. Use those as an opportunity to identify what's helping psychological safety in your team and what's hindering it. And educate upwards. Discuss it with your team, with your leaders, maybe in your one-on-ones with your senior manager. How can they become champions for psychological safety themselves? We want to reward it. So let's recognize team members and reward team members who go out of their way to create a psychologically safe environment. A good example of that is the company Etsy. Etsy has a 3-armed sweater award. Every year that's given to the engineer who inadvertently causes the most interesting or the most learning-filled incident. Tied to this is blameless retrospectives and incident postmortems. The focus should be on learning and rewarding identification of problems, not punishing those who spoke up. And we need to be willing to challenge senior stakeholders that are corrosive or that erode psychological safety during the interactions with our team. So if someone is verbally abusing one of our team members, even if they're at a higher level than us, we shouldn't stay silent. Because if we're doing that, we're telling our team members that behavior is tolerated. It's okay. We need to take that senior leader aside after the meeting and help them understand why what they did was inappropriate. And we need to circle back with our team and help them work through the trauma they've gone through. Organizations will only improve when we take a stand. So we started off this talk looking at an air disaster. Well, let's look at a different situation, a situation that could have become a disaster but didn't. Everyone is aware of the Miracle on the Hudson. In January 2009, this US Airways jet flying out of New York happened to hit a flock of Canada geese. Captain Sully and First Officer Jeffrey Skiles, they effectively used the lessons from CRM to save all 155 people aboard. They clearly communicated with one another. There was no hesitancy, no fear, no disagreement when they were talking to one another. Even though Sully was a much higher level than Skiles, he listened to Skiles. He took his advice. He didn't abuse him. There was no ridicule or annoyance expressed by Sully when Skiles was unable to restart the engines. And there was clear communication and a willingness to experiment between Sully and Patrick Harton, who was the air traffic controller, which is critical when you consider that Captain Sully went with the riskiest option available to him, which was landing on the river. Compared to all the options available, he decided that that was the one that would succeed, but it happened to be the riskiest option. He could have been told, you're not allowed to do this, don't try it, but he felt safe doing so. And as a result, he saved all those lives. I'd like to close with this quote. If you make any excuse for not extending psychological safety to your team members, you're choosing to value something more than human beings. And after the last few years that we've had, all of us experiencing the issues with the pandemic, that's simply unacceptable. If you'd like to know more about this topic, there's a few resources I'd like to share with you. There's a couple of books I could point you to. Amy Edmondson's written the book, The Fearless Organization. Wonderful case studies and examples in there of psychological safety in many different industries. And Dr. Timothy Clark, who came up with that model, he has a book, The 4 Stages of Psychological Safety, explaining how do we get from one stage to the next. There's a couple of great documentaries that are on Netflix. The first one, Challenger, The Final Flight, is about the tragedy of the Space Shuttle Challenger and the defects or the issues with the solid rocket booster and the inability of the engineers to get their concerns heard. And then Downfall, the case against Boeing, has to do with the Boeing 737 MAX and the problems that resulted in the last 15, 20 years or 10 years with that aircraft. And finally, there's a really wonderful website I would want to point you to, psychsafety.co.uk. Tons of great resources. They have a weekly newsletter that curates some of the best content that's available out there on psychological safety. They have a Slack community where you can actively discuss topics on it with other leaders, and they have occasional virtual meetups. Thanks so much for your attention, and I'm ready to take on any questions.
Thanks a lot, Kiran. That was really interesting, and I would say that
And feel free to either ask the question out loud, or you can type it into the chat or the Q&A panels.
Great. Kiran, can you hear me okay?
And I think there was a question about the recording. Hari, maybe you could address that. I think Enoch was asking, will the recording be available somewhere?
Hari, I think we are able to hear. Kiran, Hari, were you able to hear Hari Prasad?
I know that we are recording, so my assumption is it would be available or posted somewhere. Any questions from anyone?
Yeah, Hari, I think we have.
I think Kiran got some audio receiving issues. I just put a chat to him.
Okay.
Okay. So regarding the recording, let me address that. We are recording this session. We will be uploading that in the YouTube channel, and we.
Now I can. Yeah, you'd cut out for a little while before.
Yeah, you can hear me, right? Kiran, can you hear us?
No, unfortunately, I think Hari's microphone got cut out.
Okay, I'm quite not sure. Is there an issue? Beulah, will you be able to give
Yeah,
a
I can definitely hear. Like, yes, I'm able to hear.
Oh, okay, great. You can hear us now, right?
Hari, I think he has a, there is a
I
lag.
think there
between
is
what
some
we-
issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it looks like Kiran can't hear. So if we can put the questions on the chat, I think it might be.
Absolutely. Yes. And I think there's a question from Vivek about the. Is everyone able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay,
We can hear
good.
you clearly. Yeah.
So that's perfect. Yeah, and I can hear you just fine. There's a question from Vivek about getting a copy of the presentation.
Kiran, to answer that, I have already mentioned, probably we can share the recording of this session with Vivek and all the
Yeah, I'm able
participants.
to.
Will be
I was thinking that my microphone was working. Like. Okay. So yes, so to Vivek's question, I am providing a copy of the presentation to the through my contact with the Lakeshore Chapter. So yes, you would be able to get a copy of that. Any other questions?
I think we can wind. I'm quite not sure whether Kiran is able to hear us. Probably we can formally close this one. I would now like to invite Srijesh to convey the vote of thanks to Kiran.
Perfect. And what I will be doing is I will provide the updated copy of my presentation in PDF format. So that way you'll have sort of the current version, because I did add a couple of slides in when we extended the duration from the original 20 minutes up to 45 minutes.
Right. So Kiran, hope you are able to hear me.
Any other questions?
Hari, am I audible? Sorry.
Yes, Rijesh, you are audible.
Yes, yes.
So Kiran, I think there is a small challenge with the audio that we are looking at. So we will post these questions to you over an email or a chat that we have. So probably we can look at this
Yes.
on an offline as we proceed.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So at this point, I would like to take a moment to express my heartfelt gratitude to Kiran for delivering such a wonderful session. Psychological safety was probably never a thought in, at least in my personal capacity. It was never a thought in my mind. So you have ignited a
That's
lot of
perfect,
thoughts.
Srijesh. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It ignited a lot of thoughts and probably some reading that we could do. So thank you very much for your wonderful session. And on behalf of the entire PMI Kerala Chapter members and the participants over this particular call, I'll take this liberty to thank you for taking your time and effort to prepare such a fantastic session. So your hard work, dedication are truly appreciated. We are grateful for the knowledge and the inspiration that you shared us today. Thank you so much. And I would like to thank the entire participant who made it to this session today. I know that you have taken a lot of personal time out to join this particular session. I am sure all of us had a lot of takebacks from this particular session and probably a lot of reading that we could do.
Thank you so much.
As such, right? Thank you, Beulah and Jay Kishore from Beulah from the Lakeshore Chapter, Jay Kishore, our president in Kerala Chapter, for their support and organizing this particular joint sessions. So I would say thank you, Kiran, thank you, participants, and thank you all my fellow board members who are part of this particular session. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful learning and probably take back whatever learning that you learned today on psychological safety into your future sessions. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Srijesh. Hope you can hear me now properly.
Yes, we can hear you.
I have pasted the PDU claim
Thank
code
you all.
for this session
Take care.
in the chat. So whoever wants to claim the PDU, please use the code which I have pasted in the chat. The expiry date is 30th. Individuals, we will be sending this across our email as well.
Thì chắc là nó phải gọi ai tới đó.
Was there a question? We couldn't hear.
I think that was a glitch. Okay, fine then. Thanks everyone. Thanks for joining for this session. Hope we will continue all these collaborations in future as well, and we will come back with more and more interesting topics. So see you then. Have a great day.
Thank you, Kiran.
Everyone.
Yes, bye.